Hello and welcome to your award-winning The Reasons I'm Broke podcast, bringing you the reasons we're broke every single week through news and headlines ranging from comics, movies, TV, video games, and more. I'm Daniel, and your other host this week from the Ronin console is Millennial Mike. Welcome back, Millennial.
Glad to be back. You should just call me Cynical Mike.
Cynical
that's
Mike.
My new Cynical Mike, Selenial Mike, or whatever.
Yeah, you'll definitely get into
here.
Selenial Mike when we get into the Warner Brothers Flash news. Like we were saying off air, I'm not even going to bring up any full circle stuff. So then we'll really get you at your 100. But if this is your very first episode of the show, the way we format it is we go through this week's news, and then we end it with the Brokehead Block, which is the more personal side of the show, where you get to know Millennial Mike and I a little bit better. So let's jump right in and explore sector number 566. The Pokemon Company achieved another year of record-breaking milestones by printing nearly 10 billion cards in 2022. So this marks the second consecutive year and continued a 3-year streak of surpassing their own previous record. So the growth in print runs can be attributed to the increasing interest in Pokemon, with the company still experiencing high demand throughout the pandemic and afterward. Despite occasional printing issues, the company is preparing for the release of new sets, including Paldea Evolved. The pre-release just happened over the weekend. Obsidian Flames, which features a Darkness Terra-type Charizard card, which anytime there is a Charizard thrown into the sets, that set ends up getting really hot. That card ends up being the most sought after. One of my least favorite Pokemon. And this is what sucks, Millennial. Every time they throw in a Charizard, and it's going to happen with that new Pokemon 151 set that's releasing, they inevitably sometimes throw in the Bulbasaur line, and I collect those. But whenever that happens, I go in, I buy booster packs, and I pull everyone, including Charizard, except for my Bulbasaur trio. And that's where people are like, well, you got the valuable card, and you can just sell it and get the cards you need. I'm like, yeah, but why can't I once just pull the cards, the ones I want?
Yeah.
Are you surprised that Pokemon has continued this streak even after the pandemic?
I'm actually surprised how well it was doing during the pandemic, because you think that something like a trading card game or even a dueling card game or something like that would be better in person. So like the more people are actually out and socializing, the more likely they are to do this kind of thing. But I don't get the impression that people are necessarily more social than they were. So I'm very curious on what kind of people are making these purchases.
Well, I'll tell you that answer right now, because I saw my player base when I ran the comic shop. It was during the pandemic, and my player base disappeared. What I started seeing was what I first attributed it to New Yorkers and Californians here in Florida. They were flocking down to Florida. And from what I understand from that South Park episode, they were going everywhere else in the U.S. as well, except New York and California. So I'm like, okay, these are out-of-staters, people in their 20s coming in and they're buying Pokemon cards. But I started to notice that they were not players at all. They were simply eBayers, they were collectors, they were mispronouncing Pokemon, they were mispronouncing the name Pokemon even. They didn't really know what they were buying. Yeah, Pokemon is what they were saying. So I'm like, okay, this is kind of bizarre. And it took me a long time. It took a bunch of heads getting together and figuring out like, okay, this manager from that company and this one, all of us to find out that it was due to the YouTube influencers. So people like Logan Paul, what they did during the pandemic is they bought up expensive old sets, they cracked them open on YouTube, and then they sent them out to get graded. And that caused an influx of people to believe that there was a massive business behind it. So all of these values shot up. Booster packs, anything that I had, even terrible sets, people were buying up. Normally those booster cards are $3.99 a pack. We bumped them up to $7.99 a pack, and people were still not wincing at all at the price. They were buying them up. So that's what ended up happening with the Pokemon TCG. After we started running Pokemon League again, very few of my regular Pokemon players came back to play. Most of the kids, unfortunately, just did not come back. They grew out of it. They were killed off by the fact that there weren't any product available, so their interest completely switched to something else. And a lot of them went over to Yu-Gi-Oh!
That's too bad.
Yeah, they went to the dark side.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I mean, I imagine that kind of fate is probably likely to happen to any trading card game that is popular. I mean, I'm surprised that Pokemon up until now hasn't really had a lot of that kind of crowd. Who's more of like, I guess, what would you call them? Prospectors, I guess.
Yeah, they're yeah. You can call them prospectors, but they're called speculators in the market.
Ah, okay, yeah. So yeah, I mean, I guess Pokemon just they made it. That's like a good thing, I guess you could say.
Yeah, my main concern with it was that they were appealing to these speculators that are not going to be there in 10 years. They're not going to be there in 5 years. I'd rather cater to the players that, because I saw it happen, that are then going to grow up and get their kids into it, and those kids are going to continue the sales and the generations. I saw that happen through one generation, and
it's short game basically instead of long game.
Exactly right. And once they lose interest in selling these things on eBay, there goes your card game.
That makes sense.
In spite of all this, I know that at the local shops, the player base is slowly returning. It's a rebuild phase, and throughout it, as we mentioned, collectors are there to buy them up. But the good news is Pokemon seems to be matching demand. They're probably a little behind still, but they're printing more than ever to get more cards out there. When Scott and I go to Target and he buys booster packs, we can usually find some stuff, and he buys whatever he can find at this point. But here we have some more sales news, as the Oricon mid-year report on manga sales in 2023 reveals that Kodansha's Blue Lock is the highest selling series overall, followed by Chainsaw Man. So One Piece's volume 105 takes the lead in individual volume sales, but sports manga like Slam Dunk and Blue Lock have gained popularity, driven by factors such as a new movie and then the FIFA World Cup. Shonen manga, my favorite, of course, continues to dominate the market. Have you read any of these, and what do you think this says about the current reader base? I mean, it's pretty much the same. Isn't it always a shonen that ends up topping the charts?
Yeah, I mean, shonen is basically the demographic that all pop culture, regardless of whether it be Japan or America, is aimed at. Like, that's what your Marvel movie is aimed at. That's what your DC movie, your Star Wars movie, your video games is the shonen, which is basically a young man, which is like late teens to like early 20s, which is kind of a weird demographic because, I mean, I think that there are a lot of like pretty, well, I guess it depends on where you're talking about and even what time period you're talking about. But once you get into your 20s, I feel like, a lot of those people are going to be more adult oriented. But yeah, I think I would say an interesting thing I have to say about that is Blue Lock is, I didn't read the manga. I've seen some of the panels. The panels are really like well drawn and whatnot. And I do like sports manga. Like, it's pretty entertaining. Blue Lock, however, I just think is kind of silly. Like, I watched the anime and the story is just kind of, it ain't it. Like, now, like Slam Dunk, I've heard great things about. There was actually a movie that came out recently that's doing really well. So I'm excited to see that. But Chainsaw Man is good. It's shonen, but it's one of the better shonen, but it's pretty good. So
even I've been reading some Chainsaw Man, and I'm like, it's all right so far. It's a little bit heavier than some of the other shonen that I've watched or read. So I'm like, all right, it's got a little bit of darkness to it, right? It's got demons and even heavier, I think, in some parts than Demon Slayer, because I think Demon Slayer really lightened up once it got to the Mugen Train arc. Like, after that, it kind of got a little silly. But at the beginning with his family and he's trying to figure things out, I mean, it was really heavy. And I feel like Chainsaw Man is sort of there. There's still that bit of like him just trying to hook up with the one girl, which I feel like, all right, this is clearly aimed at teens, but I'm sticking with it so far.
Yeah. It's, I will say that, like, compared to a lot of other shonen, I would say that Denji, like, his, like, I guess, shonen horniness is like, a lot of other shonen will just fully play into the fact that, like, it's supposed to be funny, or it's supposed to be like, how can I say it? I'm trying to think of a good way to put it.
Pedestrian.
I feel like Chainsaw Man's a lot more honest in, I think, Chainsaw Man, whereas in other stuff, it's kind of like there's a layer on top of it that's kind of like trying to play off the horniness as a joke. So just in case you don't think that like, you don't take what he's doing or what's happening seriously, you can at least laugh at it. But with this, it's like, it's not necessarily a joke. It's like, he's being 100% sincere. So when he says something awkward or does something awkward or even, I would say, socially unacceptable, that's the way it's meant to be taken. There's no like apology. Whereas I feel like in a lot of other shonen there is. So it's a small distinction to make, but I think it's worth it.
I had heard of Blue Lock the last time I'd heard you guys talk about it on Ronin Console, but it seems like it's kind of snuck up over the last year because I remember it being not necessarily the top 5 manga even, but it was still in the top 10 manga. It was when I started seeing things like that volleyball one, I forgot what that one was called, but when that Haikyuu, when that gained so much popularity, like now it makes sense that even other sports manga are starting to pick up because I feel like, 10 years ago, you probably couldn't get away with, at least in North America, trying to do a successful sports manga. But now it seems like the formula of high school teens getting into trying to become the best, the basic shonen thing, trying to become the best at it. There's a rival, there's a girl, whatever. You put that formula into sports and it seems to work out okay in spite of what the sport is, because Blue Lock, while it is wildly popular in the world, here in the US, it's not the most popular sport, yet it still seems to be doing pretty well.
Yeah, I would say that there is probably a legacy of sports anime before it that really have opened up. Haikyuu is one of them. Slam Dunk, Kuroko Basket is another one. So there's a lot of other sports anime that, while not as big as this, definitely like soft people up to this. And I think that I don't think that Blue Lock is like especially shonen. Like compared to like the other like sports anime, which I feel are like 90% sports, 10% shonen. This is like 90% shonen, 10% sports.
Gotcha.
So yeah.
Well, it seems like the future of manga may evolve over time as Shueisha, who is the publisher behind popular franchises like One Piece and Demon Slayer, has announced a new imprint called Jumptoon. So it's set to launch next year. Jumptoon will focus on vertically read manga designed for smartphones in full color. So this imprint aims to explore the future of manga and is currently holding a contest in Japan where the winner will be serialized in Jumptoon. So this is a lot like the Korean comics, isn't it? Where they're trying to get into that market, it seems like. I know even Kelly reads that app. I forget what it's called, but DC is in there. They've got original stories in there, and even the successes of those. Webtoons, there you go. From the success of that, I've seen them imprint onto physical copies, which is a little bizarre.
Lately, there's been a lot of talk about what's called manhwa. So manhwa is Korean. No, sorry. Manhwa is Chinese.
Okay.
And then Korean has a different. So it's manhwa and manhwa. So Korean manhwa is manhwa, and then Chinese manhwa is manhua, right? So I think they're both pronounced manhwa, but there's been a lot of talk in the industry, even amongst the Japanese anime industry, about the market and its potential competition from other countries and their own basically versions of manga and anime, because China has been making a lot of really good stuff. Like their output in general is just a lot lower, of course, than Japan, but they've been putting out some stuff that just completely blows away 90% of Japanese anime as far as quality, both in the manga side and in the anime side, and same thing with Korean manhwa as well. So the market there isn't as big, but it's starting to become bigger. And I think that this is almost like Japan trying to get ahead of their competitors almost.
Yeah, because I've seen that even that format of webtoon. I don't know. For some reason, did you see that one film that they talked about like a year ago where it was a little bit ahead of its time? Of it had a vertical type of dimension to it rather than a horizontal, and it was like the first one of its kind, something that you can watch on your phone.
The streaming service called Quibi.
Okay, so it's a whole service, you're saying?
Yeah. There's a service called Quibi, and it was purchased by I think it was like purchased by Yahoo or something like that. But yeah, they made several series.
Well,
The series were like short, like 10 or minute or less episodes, and they were vertical. You could watch it vertical.
which could end up being I don't know if people are as a whole used to that format yet, especially with television being what it is, but digital books are a little bit differently because it seems like a lot of people, I think a lot more people consume manga digitally than they do physically, at least here in the US. I can't speak about overseas, but do you think that that format could affect that Jumptoon being the standard, let's say in 10 years, if people continue to read manga on their smartphones rather than picking up a book and reading it? Because I've even seen it in American comics. The panels are formatted to fit digital books and digital screens rather than the imprint first, which is something that I've had my frustrations with. But do you think that this kind of format is going to be what we see in 10 years?
I think that there could be some optimizations that you can make to digital comic books, digital manga, things like that, to make it better on a smartphone. However, I don't necessarily prefer the Webtoon infinite scrolling method.
Mm-hmm.
I almost feel like the pages give you an artificial way to kind of create moments like a panel does,
Yeah.
you know? Whereas I feel like sometimes when you have this infinite scroll, like what happens with some of the manhwa that I read, the webtoons that I've read, is that they just everything is just infinite. Like it doesn't ever stop. So I feel like I can like read forever, but I also feel kind of exhausted and even bored because I feel like it's just one long. There's no rest. There's no like, okay, here this is like the end of an important event, and here is the beginning of another event. So because I don't get that impression, it actually takes me out. Well, while it keeps me in the process of reading, it takes me out of the story in a way. So I actually think that it's okay maybe for like if you had a short, very action-packed story where it's just like beginning to end, it just doesn't stop. That might be good. But if you're trying to tell like a drama with like all these ups and downs and nuances and character moments and stuff, you might not want to do that.
I touched on it a little bit earlier, how I've noticed that my physical comics have been split vertically. Like you can take a page, cut it in half, and that's the new format that they've done because they want it to fit screens. And they've told their artists, this, you need to make sure to have these panels and just fit your artwork in there. So they've been constricted to those new formats, at least with the big two. So you as a manga reader, you were mentioning that they could reformat some of it to be a little more digital friendly or a little more Jumptoon friendly. Would it annoy you the way it does me if you're someone, you grew up on manga, you grew up on that format, that you started noticing more vertical panels and you're like, wait a second, and you know that it's because they're trying to optimize it for things like Webtoon?
Yeah, I would say it's hard to say. It really is. I think that inherently widescreen is cinematic. And at heart, I like cinematic things. I like movies that are more cinematic and less televisual. I like comic books and video games that are cinematic, right? So wide, open, sweeping shots, landscapes, still frames, like when you just hold, like those kinds of things are better. Whereas I feel like a lot of things that are meant to be kind of just more objective, televisual, based upon dialogue, are a lot more up and down, tall, kind of just like that's kind of the vibe that I get. So I don't necessarily mind it if it's implemented properly. But in general, I don't like the transition of all media being less slow, cinematic, and rich in that way, and more kind of like objective, televisual, dialogue heavy kind of thing. So it does kind of annoy me in general, but I hope it doesn't make it that much of a change.
Yeah, I do hope we're not the dinosaurs in that, because I think naturally, as you were saying, yes, our definition of cinematic are landscapes. But I think even when people go outside and they notice what is around them, they tend to go left and right rather than, up and down, simply because there's more to see and a landscape rather than just the blue sky. So I think naturally the human eye and people identify big with left and right rather than up and down. So I think because
when you look at a person, you look up and down. Like when you're checking someone out, you want to look up and down, right?
Yeah.
When you're reading dialogue, you read up to down. So like when it comes to like people, like like, I don't know, like those procedural dramas where it's just like shot, reverse shot, like this person enters the room. What does this person look like? Now, what is he saying? Like, it's more about like people interacting. So you're looking at people, you're hearing what they have to say. But you don't get a lot of crowds and big things, and you don't get to like take in the grandeur of like the space that you're in as much. So yeah, I can see that if everything was kind of biased to that, regardless of what the stories were, because what always inevitably happens is that not just the presentation changes, but people realize like, hey, if this is how it's going to be, we should change everything, like the way that we make the content, and even the stories that we write should be more focused on how it's going to end up, because that's the logical conclusion of things. So I'm not sure I am ready for that, but we'll have to see, I guess.
Yeah, I'm not ready for it either. But I hope everyone enjoyed their mini-sode of Ronin Console. That was a little hint of what you can get over on Millennial Mike and Crew's show, which we'll talk about at the end as well. But here we have some Marvel comic book talk and some WB news and overall movie news. As first off, Scott Adkins reflected on X-Men Origins Wolverine and their portrayal of Deadpool, stating that it could, quote, could have been so much worse, end quote. So Adkins, who played the final version of Deadpool in the film, admits to being part of the problem, but explains he was following directions. He revealed that Ryan Reynolds, who now plays the character, was not present during the Deadpool scenes and must have been disappointed with the outcome. Adkins also shared that there were other versions of Deadpool that were considered, including one with a fishbowl on his head, but fortunately they didn't go through with that idea. So yeah, fishbowl on his head would have been much worse.
Mysterio Deadpool.
Yeah, I mean, it was already, Cyclops. He had the Baraka arms from Mortal Kombat. He had some other couple of other powers too, from what I remember. But yeah, why not throw in Mysterio? They were going all out anyway.
Yeah, the multiverse before the multiverse, I think it's funny how this news comes out so long after the event. And I think that it's funny how we get a lot of clarity on things after the event, and the most amount of passion and discussion and criticism and all that stuff happens from us, like usually weeks, months, or even years, a few years after something happens, if it even has that much of an impact at all, right? Most things now don't have that much of an impact. They'll last a few months at most. But it's just funny, like now that we can see this and realize, like, yeah, it actually could have been worse. Because me personally, I wasn't really that offended by this. I was not that offended. Some people acted so like it was just complete sacrilege, complete like just the worst. And those kinds of people always accept other things from other studios, if you know what I mean. So yep. It always kind of just annoyed me how like they acted like so pearl clutchy about it. But yeah, and I don't know. I'm totally with Scott Adkins. He's like, hey, I was doing my job, and honestly, it's like they were being more experimental than even how it ended up. So it's interesting, a little bit of insight.
Having really remembered that period when that movie came out, I don't think I caught it until it came out on DVD. I can't remember if I was working at the movie theater at the time, but I wasn't. I like the Wolverine movies. I like the X-Men movies a lot, but the Origins one, I do remember, of course, the backlash, at least online, over Deadpool. But it was yeah, they were loud, but it was kind of minimal. Deadpool wasn't as big as, he wasn't the, Marvel's Harley Quinn or whatever, as they called it. Until later on. It was like another couple of years before Deadpool really, really took off. And the timing was perfect with the more traditional Deadpool movie that they came out with later on. So yeah, it was, I feel like I was more annoyed at the fact that the movie itself wasn't very good rather than Deadpool, because I'm not a Deadpool fan. I actually, I think he's an obnoxious character, and I thought I'm like, good, have him not talk. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, I didn't like his jokes in the comics. I'm not a fan at all. So I'm like, keep him fucking shut. Like, I get that that's anti what the character is, because he's more talkative than even Spider-Man sometimes. So by having him silent, sure, it's not at all like the character, but again, I'm like, whatever. The worst part of it are more like it doesn't exactly fit with the previous X-Men films.
Right. They were serious.
Well, yeah, they were serious, but also some of the characters, I'm like, I think I remember a young version of her already in the previous movie. How's she in the past? I think it was Emma Frost even that showed up in there, but then she shows up in another movie later on or something. I don't know, but that's where it started.
People also complained about the fact that he was in a PG-13 movie, so he never got to be the way that they expected him to be. They wanted him to swear, they wanted him to, be violent and whatnot. But of course, those very same people are going to accept whatever's coming down the pike. So I that's why I never and will never take them seriously. But yeah, I totally get it. It wasn't a great movie. It was one of the worst for sure. I think in general, though, that it wasn't an offensive movie by any means. I always hated that this movie was used and held. It was used to hold a grudge against the entire franchise. Like, oh, like this franchise is so all over the place. Just look at Origins or whatever. Like in general, I think it's one of the most solid franchises in the comic book.
Yeah, that's one of those examples, just like the Sony ones. Anytime like a Marvel head or even someone in person, because they just repeat what they hear online, they'll say, I don't think Sony has handled Spider-Man too well. And I'm like, really? Because there's the Tobey Maguire films. Even if you were to say 2 out of 3 were good, okay, there's 2. There's the Amazing Spider-Man films. 2 of those were good. So we got already 4 out of the 5 that they made. We got Spider-Verse. There's 6 out of the 5. What are you talking about? Like when I lay it out like that, it's like clearly they've done better movies than bad ones. So, and I think X-Men's another example of that.
They're just not allowed to. It's just like everything is always an excuse for. Yeah, I'm getting back into this whole car. I don't want to start this conversation again. I'm done. I left this behind there. It's over. It's gone. But yeah, it's like it was always just basically like, we're waiting for you to slip up so we can, kick you back to Disney or whatever. That's what it always was. But the baggage.
Well, one of my favorite films of last year, I think it ended up getting a few Oscars here on the show, one of which may have been Best Picture, is Top Gun Maverick, as in a surprising turn of events. The long-awaited sequel to the 1986 film continues to set records over a year after its release. So Maverick reached the milestone in Japan. According to Deadline, the film has raked in an impressive $101.5 million at the Japanese box office, now making it Cruise's highest grossing film in that market. So good for Top Gun Maverick, good for Japan. Again, one of my favorite films of last year, and I'm glad that it's still doing incredibly well.
Movie's amazing. I'm actually surprised it's still in Japanese theaters. They probably just got a really late showing, I guess. Or
very delayed release.
Amazing movie. I watched the movie 3 times in theaters.
Oh, nice. Yeah. I only got to see it the one time, but as soon as it was up for pre-order for 4K, I got it physically. Remember how they released it? They were like, it's out on Paramount Plus. And it's like, okay, when's it out on Blu-ray? And they're like, we don't know. And then a month later, they're like, all right, it's out digitally. Okay, when's it out on 4K? I don't know. And then they announced it like a month later. They were really smart with the way they released it in waves.
Oh, yeah. I wonder if they'll make another sequel. I kind of hope they don't, but it's like...
It made so much money. They will.
I know. The thing is that Tom Cruise, I have a lot of respect for the guy, and I think that he always puts a certain degree of diligence into whatever he does. Like, no one's complaining about them making more
Mission Impossible
movies. Exactly. It's like, because it's just like an experience that you actually want again. The thing is, I don't know if Top Gun Maverick is the same kind of thing, but we'll have to see.
Yeah, I mean, I think they definitely will make a third one, and it's just amazing that it captured so many people. It's done so well, and we've discussed it endlessly here on the show on how traditional it is and its storytelling, how it's not just made to check off check marks. It just hits all the right notes, and I can't wait for more, and I don't blame them for making more.
Yeah. I mean, hey, of all the remakes or sequels to do, this is one that I can excuse.
And another franchise that I can forever excuse, I have all the films, and I went to see this latest one this past weekend, is Fast and Furious. The latest one, Fast 10, once again making waves at the box office, both domestically and internationally. According to Deadline, the film has achieved a significant milestone by surpassing 500 million in ticket sales worldwide. So this achievement comes during the second week since its release, with 399 million generated from international markets and 108 from domestic. So the film's global standing is at 507.2 million. So it holds the title for third highest grossing film of 2023. So this now propels the whole Fast saga beyond the $7 billion mark, which is a remarkable milestone in its history. And they were trying to spin it. One site was trying to spin it off as a negative, like 64% drop. And then it hit $500 million. International market is here for this franchise still.
Yeah. I would say, so I didn't watch the movie, and, of course I watched it with friends. It's like, what movies am I going to make excuses for, and what movies why not? It's like, I even went to go see Guardians, which is like a taboo. It's a taboo.
Why?
I know.
You and Scott, man. I swear to God. What am I going to do with you guys?
Some friends of mine invited me, and they said, "Hey, I have an extra ticket." And I said, "Okay," because I wanted to hang out with them, and I didn't want to be that guy,
Yeah,
So hopefully
you're better than I am.
That doesn't continue to happen to me, because I'll be a different person. I won't be the millennial Mike that you guys know anymore.
Nope.
but in regards to Fast X, I don't know. I feel like I should kind of feel the same way, because the movies are like, they're really bad, and it doesn't really even matter if they know how bad they are or not, like if that's intentional. But I will say I did enjoy going to see it with friends, and there's no doubt. Like I will say, trying to spin this as not a success is just silly, because they're so ridiculously successful that, like, now the only thing they can do is to not hit their own bar at this point. So yeah, I would definitely say that's clickbait. Although, I mean, what websites are actually against the Fast franchise?
It was one of those like pro Disney ones. Like, I think it was CBR or something that hit that one, like 64% drop. And meanwhile, they're like, Little Mermaid's amazing. That kind of like, all right, I see where you're going.
Yeah. yeah. Okay, I get you.
Yeah, I'm with you. Like, I understand that objectively, these Fast and Furious movies, like maybe one or two you can say like are good films, like maybe the first one. But
the third one.
That's the
Tokyo Drift.
Oh yeah, well, of course you do.
Tokyo Drift is so good.
I feel like Tokyo Drift has the same effect that the one Star Wars film that has Darth Vader at the very end. Like, it tells you how the rebels got the Death Star plans. I forgot which one it was called. It was terrible.
Rogue One.
People were tricked into thinking that was a good movie because of that Darth Vader scene at the end, which they threw in later on post-production.
No, people were tricked into thinking that was a good movie by making it amongst the sequel movies. That's how they were tricked. It's like, and that's how all the new TV shows that aren't like absolute trash, like Andor or whatever, that's how they trick people into that too. It's like, hey, it's not Book of Boba Fett. It's not, it's like a little bit better. It's like, They make their own little bar, and since it's not compared to any other TV at all anywhere, that it's only compared to other Star Wars content, it's just like they can literally just make their own bar. So that's probably how it was with Tokyo Drift. Although I love the whole vibe and style, like the nighttime, the Tokyo, the soundtrack. It was just so much fun.
Well, I know that when Tokyo Drift was screened for audiences, they did not have that end scene with Dom, where he shows up at the end, where it really connects it to the Fast and Furious franchise. And when they added that after the fact, it got audiences really excited because it connected it to the Fast and Furious franchise. You hadn't seen Dom for 2 films up to that point. He wasn't in Too Fast, Too Furious. And then that set up, it was like the birth of a fucking franchise, oddly enough. That may have been the scene that saved the whole Fast and Furious franchise. Because if you didn't have Dom there, you don't have Fast and Furious 4. You don't have that setup for the next one.
Yeah.
But with Fast 10, man, I know what I'm getting, and I got it. I got my action scenes. It wasn't as goofy as Fast 9, so that's one thing that I was a little disappointed with. And also Jason Momoa.
You wanted it to be goofier.
Oh, of course. Like, I wanted it to get ridiculous. Like, they went into space in the last one, and I'm like, that's fine. Like, I don't care. Like, it's Fast and Furious. They had this one scene where they're swinging on a bridge with a car, like,
yeah,
that's the bar.
That was hilarious.
It was so funny.
Around a mountain. And
yes.
then it like lets go of the grappling hook, and then a jet comes out and and it picks up midair. Like he planned it.
Yes.
and the grappling hook didn't come out of the car. He picked up the grappling hook in his wheel well.
Yes. Yep.
And then swung around the mountain, and then it just came out of his wheel well at the right time.
Yep.
So that way he could.
He like turned the wheel like he knew he was going to catch it.
I was dying in the theater when I saw that. I was dying. Oh my goodness. But oh my God, it's so funny. Like I really hate the fact that I'm now the person to watch things because it's bad. I hate that about myself, but it's so funny.
The best part of this one was when he softened his fall, when he's like, who said anything about landing or parachutes? And he goes off the back end of the aircraft, and he breaks his landing
then lands on 2 cars
by landing on 2 fucking cars. Like, that's how he broke his landing. I'm like, okay, yeah, just land on 2 other hard things and you'll be fine.
Yeah. It's like the laws of physics, and also that ball, like the ball. The bomb.
The bomb.
It was. Are we spoiling things? Does it matter?
I mean, it's Fast and Furious. How much can you really? Maybe the deaths, like I wouldn't mention, or who returns, but I mean, these are just action sequences.
Even that is like, come on, like really, it's Fast and Furious. Like there's no stakes.
Yeah, they all come.
Yeah, like there's this like bomb that's like it comes out of the back of this truck and it's rolling. So first and foremost, they're trying to blow up. What is it?
Vatican, right?
The Vatican. But like, wait, the Vatican is on a hill. It's high in elevation. Like, but the ball was rolling downhill all till it got to like, how does this even work? And it was like crashing through buses and like cars and buildings without even stopping.
On fire too.
On fire. But then other times, because it's funny, like it would slow down and like get to like a little tiny ledge. So it can stop, but then momentum like from like crashing into things wouldn't slow it down at all. Like it was so ridiculous.
Let me ask you this last thing about Fast. How bad was Momoa? It wasn't just me, right? Like he was bad even for like Brie Larson was terrible in this too, but like Momoa was the worst. Like he couldn't decide whether he was the Joker, Jack Sparrow, or Lobo. It's like it was his fucking audition to Lobo.
I was like, can we go back to like the super machismo? Like,
yes.
And it's we have too much of that masculinity nowadays anyway. Like, okay, come on, Momoa. It's like, take your shirt off and just do your thing, okay? Like, stop trying to...
Yeah, he wasn't good at whatever he was doing.
Yeah. Honestly, you know what? Brie Larson did better than Momoa.
Yeah, she did. Not a whole lot better, but she did.
I've never had like I've never felt very passionately against Brie Larson. As a matter of fact, I actually like a lot of the films that she's in, aside from the movie that I didn't see her in, which is
Captain Marvel.
Yes, I never watched that, and trailers were kind of annoying or whatever, and it looked bad. But I mean, like what was it? Glass Castle, Free Fire, Short Term 12 is really good. There's another one called, what's it called? Is it called House Home? It's one where it's like her and her daughter were like raised together, and it's like in captivity. That Scott was really Pilgrim. Good. So Scott Pilgrim. That was that's she wasn't like really big in that, but yeah, no, she's a good actress in my opinion. I just think that some of the stuff she says outside of the movies is annoying. Mm-hmm. But I really liked her in this too. She was rocking. Her wardrobe was amazing. Like she looked great. So I'm like, okay, let's go.
Well, it sounds like we're getting 2 more films after Fast 10, and I'm here for it, especially with how well this one is doing. On the other side, though, we've got Disney, as The Little Mermaid is in a bit of trouble, Makeup artist Peter King, who worked on Little Mermaid, has responded to criticism of Ursula's makeup in the film. So while Melissa McCarthy's performance as Ursula has been praised by some, others have raised concerns about the makeup not being done by a member of the LGBTQ plus community, as the animated version was inspired by drag queen Divine. So I actually liked King's quote here. He called the suggestion offensive and stated that he can do just as good a job as a queer makeup artist. So far, the film has received mixed reviews, has done incredibly terrible in China. I think it's the lowest debut for Disney in all of 2023. But otherwise, I mean, good on Peter for standing his ground instead of, the PR response would have been, look, I understand, and I would have loved for there to have been more, but we have great crew here that are part of the LGBTQ plus community, and they gave me great insight.
He actually stood up for himself, though.
Yeah, exactly. Instead, he's like, I'm just as good. What's the problem?
Yeah. Is that like, basically, I got hired to the job because I actually am a good makeup artist. Like, that's why they chose me. It's like, I when I read this before the show, I was like, man, like, what? Like Peter King, what else has he done? Like, come on, man, let's go. Thank you.
It again reminds me of that. I don't know if you're too familiar with like the golden age or silver age of comics, whenever they would have, let's say, female character like the Lois Lane comic or a black character, they would say, okay, we need the black artists and the black writers to work on that black character. We need the women to work on the Lois Lane comic. And that was considered sexist and racist back then. Now we're in the era of if a person of color or
racism, which is just racism, but coming from the other side.
It's the same situation, but now they're demanding that a person of color or of that sexual gender should be doing those things instead. It's like, wait a sec, we were there back in the golden age. Like, how do we flip back to it again, where only those people can work on those characters? It's just kind of weird how when you see it from the outside a little bit, it's like, how do we get back here again?
Yeah. So like, first and foremost, I'm pretty vacant now on social media for the most part. And we can talk more about it later, but I switched to a flip phone. So I'm no longer using a smartphone, and I've pretty much like abandoned social media mostly, except for when at certain times of the day, I get on my desktop and I check my messages or whatever. But I just like these criticisms or whatever. I mean, who are they even coming from, and who cares? Like, I think that how it always happens is a few people will say something, and if those people are even real or legitimate or whatever, it doesn't even matter. Like, a few people say it, a article, website will pick up it, make an article out of it, and then more people will make articles off of that, and it kind of just grows from nothing, basically. So it's like, you go around, you ask people, like, does anyone or anyone that they know or anyone that they know even have any complaints about this Peter King guy? Like, no, no one actually cares. No, it's not even real. It's just a big,
And I've seen that happen firsthand. I don't know I know you're off social media, but did you see that graphic I made for that Superman Legacy post of he's rushing ahead and putting established characters in Superman Legacy without their solo films? And it like blew up on Twitter where people were tagging James Gunn like crazy.
Whenever I see you post anything about DC, I just by default just laugh.
Well, you know what I'm doing.
I just post a little laughing emoji. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, if it's an article about how DC is like trash or an article about how, even if it, whatever it is, just I laugh about it because it's funny to me.
What I'm trying to say is that I get it. I understand how easy it is to snowball an idea, because I'm now doing, in case you sort of missed what's going on here, is I'm doing to James Gunn and to Warner Brothers Discovery what they did to Zach. Everything they do, I spin into the negative.
I noticed that. And your production quality is so good that it's like, man, this is actually
it looks really legit.
Convincing.
If people run with it. It's dangerous, man.
It is, man. But hey, I tell you what, man, wield it. Like, I don't care, like they deserve it.
I'm like, when that last one really took off though, and I got a lot of hate, I was like, man, I don't want to get like Hank's here or something, like something happened. Gunn sends his guys over. I don't know.
Yeah. His I'm not gonna even say it, but yeah.
We got a couple more here from Warner Brothers Discovery, as they have launched Max, their new streaming service. It makes you re-download a whole new app, which I talked about last week. I'm annoyed by. But what they ended up doing is they faced criticism for removing specific credits and grouping them under the generic label of creators. So this decision was made by the IT department without the knowledge of top executives. Who knows if they even gave a shit anyway up until now. But fixing the credits could take weeks, according to reports. So this move received backlash from writers, directors, and guilds. Warner Brothers Discovery apologized for the oversight and pledged to correct the credits. So it just a messy fucking launch for Max. Another one.
So wait, if it's going to take a week to fix the credits, how long did it take them to unfix them?
I mean, who knows? I don't even know if they're fixed now. It says it could take weeks, so someone's probably probably have one or two people going through every fucking show now or movie that they did that on. And
so are these just like new shows that they're no longer?
I didn't see which specific ones it was, but I would assume they're like Max originals or HBO originals that were done when they were transferred over to Max. Something changed there where when they were doing up the credits, they fucked them up and just put them up under generic as creators instead of directed by, written by.
So this must be new content, because it's like,
I think so.
It didn't go back into old shows and then change it.
Right.
And take people who were in like more prestigious credit and then move them to like the miscellaneous bin.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it was newer
this
shows.
This is all part of the writer strike thing, huh?
Well, and I might even think that they did that on purpose. Like, can we get away with just labeling them as creators? Will anyone say anything? Because if they would get away with it, that could give them more leeway in some kind of future legal battle where, well, you're not really a writer. You're not really directing these. You're a creator. Like, I don't know, that's just my cynicism on my end of like, I think that was a little bit on purpose. Like them saying, we had no knowledge of this.
How official are the credits at the end of a show? Because this is the thing, right? The credits, it's not like they're going to like the contracts, copying and pasting the documents from like the actual contract of the show and then putting them in the end of the scroll.
True.
It's like, this is the credits are just for the audience, so that if they're curious, they can look to see who did what.
Well, maybe for also industry members, right? I'm assuming some of them will see a show and go, that was an amazing set. Who did the lighting or whatever? Like, do you think that happens sometimes?
Maybe, but it's like, if you're an industry member, then there's probably a lot better ways for you to find out who did what in things. Like, they have the IMDb Plus or whatever.
Yeah, that's true. I'm thinking like 1950s. Like, who did that? Give me him right there. That name right there.
Yeah, give me him on the phone. Yeah. Yeah.
We even have some Flash news this week, as the director of that film, Andy Muschietti, has confirmed in an interview with Variety that if a sequel were to happen, Ezra Miller would continue in the role. Muschietti praised Miller's performance and expressed support for the actor, mentioning their commitment and professionalism during filming. I think it's just PR 101. You never want to say that the star of your upcoming film will not play the Flash again, because that will potentially, much like the news of this universe no longer exists, that's going to kill your ticket sales. If you say there's no sequel, exactly right. Exactly.
It's like, yeah, if he wasn't safe, you're not safe, bro. Like, you are on thin ice, Ezra. Like,
I don't think Ezra is going to come back at all.
The fact he even got this far is based on pure financial necessity and nothing more. Yep. It's like, yeah, he's done.
Well, all these idiots on Facebook that are like, they should have recast Miller and just reshot the whole thing. It's like, they've already spent so much money on this. They reshot the ending with Nightmare Batman.
They're not going to make any money on this movie.
They're not going to. No, they're absolutely not. The whole thing of like, it costs $250 million. It's like, it costs way. That doesn't even include the reshoots that they did, the alternate endings, all the marketing that they're putting into it. It's a loss completely. So to reshoot the entire film with another actor, they were never going to do that.
Yeah. I will say the job they did with completely like scrubbing all of the behind the scenes drama and PR, just snafus, was very comprehensive, because this could have been like, it is a complete disaster financially, but it's not like it could be worse. I don't know. There's no word I could use to express how much worse it could have been. I mean, it's really bad, but it could be just so putrid that no one would want to even have anything to do with it. But they actually managed to straighten things out a little bit.
Well, at worst, there could have been another incident with Ezra, right? Like right before the film release.
He could have punched someone else.
It could have happened, another arrest or something, but they've somehow kept Ezra out of trouble up to this point, at least. Like there's the legal troubles that are still outstanding, but otherwise, Ezra's not at the press junkets. I doubt that they're going to be at the premiere, so they're playing the right cards.
He punches a fan at the premiere. He's like, man, I went to go see Flash, and the Flash actually punched me.
He also goes for the choke. Don't forget the choke.
Yep. Choke slam.
Yep, that's the one.
Dude, they should. We're gonna talk about MK. You know how they had DC versus Mortal Kombat?
Yes.
They should add the choke slam.
Yes. Into the next Injustice. That needs to be in there.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I want to tag Ed Boon and do that.
That would be so funny.
Well, I want to get a little bit of cynical Mike here before we go into the Patreon. I noticed, because I know you're again off social media a lot, but I've noticed the two things about this Flash movie right now, because I'm in a lot of DC Facebook groups, is that they're saying things like, you know, people that saw the film, they're like, oh, I saw the movie and blah, blah, blah. They're talking about it. And everyone's like, please tell me, does it erase the Snyderverse? And every time I want to jump in and go, it does. It's not the Snyderverse. The Snyderverse is gone. It's been gone since Zack has been gone. Like, this is the Hamadaverse. Did it erase the Hamadaverse? That's the question you want to ask, because, or the Justiceverse even, is if you want to call it that, because that's what's being implemented here. And then other people saying that ending with Nightmare Batman isn't in there anymore. Oh man, I wish it would have been in there because then we would have gotten Zack's vision. It's like, no, without Zack there, they were planning on continuing that Batman, Ben Affleck, Gal Gadot, and Henry without Zack. That was the plan before they put James in there. And to me, that would not have been good enough. And to some it is, I guess, because they're like, oh man, I just wanted to see the story. It's like, not to me though. I wanted Zack back. And if even that other alternate ending is not good enough, that's the problem. So I've just been getting really annoyed by that, because it seems like people don't understand that that's not the Snyderverse. It hasn't been the Snyderverse for years.
Yeah. The trouble with me is that I feel like we've all gotten so wrapped up in this verse thing. Like, remember I was telling you a while back that I don't like the term Snyderverse. Matter of fact, one of the last things that I posted on my social media was that, like, it was a thread on why we should get rid of the term Snyderverse, you know, altogether, and like change it to like bring back Zack or something like that. It didn't make much of a splash. I think someone else posted, like reposted it or quote tweeted it, and that made more of a splash. But we should have changed the hashtag to bring back Zack. The whole Snyderverse thing, the problem is that it merges the idea of what we have, which was a 5-movie arc, which was completely, it's not a verse at all. It couldn't be more contained. It's a story. It's a saga. It's a parable, right? If you will, it's just a story. There's no verse about it. The idea of a verse is because it's expansive and it can branch off, blah, 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 blah. I think we've gotten so kind of just brainwashed into this whole verse thing that we've merged it with what Snyder was doing. And now we're so concerned about what kind of precedents movies that aren't in his plans set for his plans, as though that it even matters.
Mm-hmm.
You know, one thing that actually matters is what makes money and what doesn't make money. Like, any movie that is not within his plans that makes a lot of money is a threat. So a movie could be solely not in the Snyderverse or whatever, right? It has nothing to do with it. It's not trying to reset anything. It's not trying to do anything. And it makes a ridiculous amount of money. Like, the Batman is more of a threat to the Snyderverse than Flash is, you know, because you could just write whatever you want. And the next thing, like, oh yeah, none of that ever happened. Like, all that is completely immaterial. But what's actually material is how many people view, what is the Batman's, what's the guy's name? Yeah. How many people view him as their Batman? Like, that is far more concerning. I think we as Snyder fans have lost the script completely.
No, I'm with you. And I don't think The Flash is going to do well either. It's going to absolutely flop. And And it's just like I said, I don't expect at this point any success out of the DC especially with James Gunn there. So I'm just here to watch it burn, I guess.
I think we will get movies that are successful. Like just objectively, they make money and maybe they're able to kind of dredge up a certain degree of support and just kind of good word of mouth. But it'll all be every other thing and it'll be incidental. I think whether they keep continuing with it will just be based upon whether they're ready to actually stand behind their creators now, because they never did that in the past when they were making money, but they may choose to do that now. So
it's possible, yeah. But that does wrap up our news for this week. We do have a comment from Adrian on Patreon who referenced last week's episode with Scott, said, quote, "Good episode, guys. I used to play Street Fighter as a kid. My favorite character is Sagat. I never got into the Mortal Kombat games or Tekken. I watched the Mortal Kombat 1995 film for the first time last year. I was impressed. Lyndon Ashby as Johnny Cage was fire. I did like the MK cartoon as a kid and MK Conquest, which was a syndicated series in the late 90s, early 2000s, which was also good. Season 1 of the web series of MK Legacy is also good. I never worked at GameStop, but I used to work at Office Depot when I was in college, and the managers always pushed us to sell the product protection plans to every customer at the register. There wasn't much of an incentive for selling them. Daniel, if you're down the rabbit hole with the you are/are not the father moments, might I recommend you go on YouTube and search Misha Collins, Alexander Calvert, then click on Misha Collins' video titled, "Let's Decide This Once and For All." That bit is hilarious, even out of context if you don't know what the running joke is, end quote. Well, Adrian, I looked it up as soon as I read this comment. I think it's the show Supernatural. I might be wrong on that one, but people pointed out that one of the actors looks exactly like one of the older actors as if when he was a child. Like they compared children photos and it's like exact. So there was this ongoing joke that he's actually the dude's father. And so they played it off with fans like, oh, I don't know. And like, was I around with your mom? How's your mom doing? Like that kind of thing. So I get it, Adrian. That was really funny just to see just how scary they did look, like kind of weird. But MK95, I love it. I will continue to praise it. Have I talked about it with you, Millennial, on how 1995's Mortal Kombat was actually like and it still is one of the better video game adaptations.
We have, I think, or if we haven't talked about it like directly with just you and me, and in general, I think it was listening to a podcast where it was you and Koji were talking about, the subject of video game adaptations, and 95 came up. And yeah, I've always heard a lot of positive things about it.
Oh, you've never seen it?
If I have, it was when I was young, probably on TV. I never actually watched it with any degree of intent. So,
all right. Well, I hope you
maybe
do
I
one
should,
day. Yeah, maybe.
Go back. I see the memes,
Yeah, it has begun. Well, Adrian, thank you so much for your comment on Patreon. Don't forget, if you would like to be heard on the show, or if you want your comment read, head on over to patreon.com/thereasonsimBroke. And right below the episode, which does go public on Mondays at 6 a.m. Eastern Time, goes up early for Patreon backers, but everyone can comment once it's out publicly, and we may read your comment on next week's show. Let's head on over to the final portion of today's episode, the Broke Block, what Millennial Mike and I have been doing, what we've been watching, playing, reading, what's been making us broke. So let's start it off with you, Mike. What have you been up to since you were last on?
Mostly the same thing that I've been on, been on last time we were talking gym, doing a lot of that, making some progress there. So I'm feeling really good about that. I've been trying to optimize my meals, with better prep. Mm-hmm. Recently, I switched from steak, which I was eating a lot of steak, which is expensive, and due to financial reasons. Yep. So this is the reason I'm broke. It's steak.
You go to chicken?
Due to finance, I went to ground beef, which is a little bit less expensive. It's not much, but it's a little bit less. And of course, over time, if that's all you're eating, then even a little bit, it's going to save you a lot over a period of time, right? Mm. Chicken is good. I just prefer red meat.
Gotcha.
But I probably should consider going to chicken. It's just like my favorite kinds of chicken are the kinds of chicken that aren't healthy for you. But I can eat like beef in any form and it's amazing. I can eat a cow in any form and it's good. So I've been
chicken could get easily dried. Like if you get like obviously fried chicken is like the most delicious, I guess, just like most bad food is, but it's also not the healthiest. And then if you have a grilled chicken, you better have like a lime or some kind of sauce to have with it to really give it its not only its flavor but seasoning, just to keep it moist because it dries up quick.
But yeah, chicken is definitely, I would say, one of the best food for macros for the price and everything. You know, chicken and rice is like that's the gym meal right there. But what I've been doing is ground beef and rice and hard boiled eggs.
Nice.
So I'll take a pound of ground beef. I'll take 1 cup of rice, cook that. That turns into about 2.5 cups of cooked rice.
Is it a brown rice?
White.
Okay.
Brown is probably better though.
You get a little more protein out of it.
Right, that's what I hear. I'm actually cooking my rice in chicken broth, which adds a little extra protein into it. And then I'll basically take 2 cups of the cooked rice, throw it inside of a food processor, along with the whole pound of ground beef and 3 hard-boiled eggs. You know, process it up, and then split that into 2 meals. That's lunch and dinner. So I've been doing that for the past like week, and that's been, you know, yummy. I've been actually adding a little garlic in there.
Ooh, nice.
And yellow garlic is really good. And then what I'll do is after I put it in my container and I'm ready to eat it, I'll grab a bottle of hot sauce and I'll just gonna have that, you know, right next to me, and I'll just pour some of that on there and eat it. And oh, it's so good. So good. Also, me and a friend of mine have been on Sundays getting together and watching The Expanse. So are you familiar with The Expanse?
I've definitely heard of it. What's it on? Is that a sci-fi show?
It was. And then I believe Amazon purchased it. They kind of brought it back.
So I'm seeing that it was like a novel series.
Yeah, it was a book series before it started. I'm on episode 8 of season 1. So we watch about, because they're an hour long each. So we watch about 4 episodes every Sunday. So the past 2 Sundays I've been watching, well, 3. I skipped one of the Sundays because I went to go see Fast 10, which I'm wondering if that was a good idea.
Oh, it was better than Guardians 3.
It was. But I'm like, like my friend in Expanse, he was so disappointed. And then when I told him I went to go see Fast 10, he's like, really? I invited him. He's like, no.
See, that was the answer. That's what he should have said to Guardians. And that's what I say to every fucking, when I used to get free Marvel tickets even.
So yeah, like my The Expanse friend wouldn't watch the Guardians or Fast X. I watched Fast X with like peers of mine. Like the friend I'm watching The Expanse with is a lot older than I am. And he actually invited me. He's like, hey, you know, I want you to see the show. Like, will you come over and watch it? I say, yeah, sure. But yeah, a bunch of other, you know, young people my age are the ones who went to go see Fast X. And then a family who I know who have some kids younger than me, but you know, I'm good friends with them. I went to go see Guardians with them. So it's like, I don't know. It's the price that I'm paying for being a social person.
Yeah, we do the things that we don't necessarily want to do, but you know that it's important for the others if you're there.
Right. And I told them, I'm like, especially with the Guardians one, it's like, you know, I would definitely not have come if you didn't invite me, but I just really wanted to hang out with you guys. So that's why I'm here. And it's funny because actually the dad, he's actually like, yeah, I don't want to be here either. So I kind of took solace in the fact that me and him and I were both like, you know, not really feeling it. Although I will admit there were parts that I did enjoy in Guardians. If you want to talk about that.
Well, Scott said it may have been worse than 2. He did not like it. So
2 looked terrible from the trailer. Like it looked terrible. It looked so stupid. This one was just a lot more serious in general, which I liked. The humor wasn't like offensive. It wasn't like terrible. Like some of it was kind of cringe. There's one thing I enjoyed about it, I would say, is that it wasn't overly politically correct. As a matter of fact, there was like nothing like that in there at all, which is very uncommon for a lot of modern blockbusters. It was very just fun, I guess, capital FUN fun. There was no like shaming or or like, real world stuff in there, which is kind of, I guess, a breath of fresh air, I would say. And then the whole, like, they had a whole backstory with Rocket or whatever. I would say it was pretty cheap from the standpoint of like trying to get you to be sentimental about it, but it was effective.
So have you seen all 3 Guardians at this point then?
I saw 1 and I saw 3. I didn't see 2.
Oh, okay. Well, I was going to ask you to rank them, but
I would say, 1 wasn't as good as you remember. I don't think it was as good. Like the ending was kind of funny, and it was like, I don't know, it was novel at the time. Like, oh, it's a Marvel movie that's kind of.
You're talking about the dance off?
Different. Yeah, the dance off was kind of funny or whatever, and the music in general was great. Like, I really liked the music, but that gimmick kind of got old. I think even watching the 3rd one, it's like, okay, they can't do this forever. Like, I'm not gonna go see this movie just to listen to a soundtrack. Like, I could just listen to it on YouTube when it comes out.
Yeah.
So I like 3 better. I like 3 better than 1. Oh God, I can't take that back. But it's
no, true. You can't. You like the more James Gunn written movie over the less James Gunn written movie. Yeah, I heard he stole the script from someone and he got sole writing credit. Kind of like how what was the Zack Snyder zombie movie, Dawn of the Dead, where even though he's credited as written that movie, the script was rewritten by Zack and someone else, and that's what they actually shot.
James Gunn, so he did this movie called The Belko Experiment. Well, he wrote it, I think, and I like that movie. Scooby-Doo was pretty funny. That's it. That's all I know. So I don't necessarily hate, like, I guess the things that he writes or has any part of, but I don't like him as a person or him as an executive, especially not that. But
right.
Beyond that, like, if you told me that like he didn't have anything to do with this, like, some people act like they know what a James Gunn thing is, and when it's not, it's like, really, he's just a studio yes man. Like, anyone could make a sophomoric comedy with animated characters. It's not like he's the only one who could do that.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's still really bizarre. I'm still in shock, man. Between you and Scott, like, I'm like, God damn. A couple of times ago, we were calling him an alleged pedo, and now it's like, I saw Guardians 3. Well, you won't hear that from me, that's for sure. You've seen, and actually, this is how badly DC fucked it up. You've seen a Guardians of the Galaxy movie over a Batman film.
Yeah, it hurts more when you know that DC chose their fate.
Yeah, that's true.
It's more offensive. Where it's like Marvel, they've always been doing their thing regardless of what anyone else. Well, no one challenged them at all. So,
well, I mean, they did do Civil War because of BVS. So there were, and of course, Endgame ended up being the stolen script for Justice League 2 and 3.
Yeah, it was supposed to be called the Serpent Society before.
That's right.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
And the Russos later admitted, like, this was all from Zack Snyder's plan.
Yeah.
Very bizarre. I mean, that was the only time they've been challenged, though. That was kind of it.
Yeah. I hate Marvel, but I'm disgusted by DC. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, because Marvel is imposing, like, they're the enemy. Like, they command a certain amount of respect just because of how powerful they are, and like they just call the shots. But DC is so pathetic. They're so disgusting.
Well, I did get to watch some pretty decent television on my end. I don't know how I've been sleeping on this show because I've liked what I've seen so far, but Succession on HBO, I guess it's on Max now.
Very popular.
Yeah, and the reason it kept popping up on my home screen when I signed in, and I'm like, why does it keep suggesting this to me? Like, I get that I have my shows and movies that I like and all, but then I'm like, all right, let me check out the first episode because I saw it's about a media tycoon and how I'm like, okay, that's kind of interesting, and how he's trying to figure out who he's going to pass the company on to, but he doesn't like any of his kids or whatever. So I'm like, all right, I checked out episode 1. I'm like, oh, this is pretty good. And now I'm finding out that they just ended the series. Like, season 4 had its finale, and I guess that's where the whole series ends. So that's more attractive to me because I'm like, okay, I can go through all 4 seasons and see the story from beginning to end, as opposed to investing now into an ongoing series. So it's good.
That's
it's solid.
Actual, like, an adult like kind of show that I think we like. It's much more. Yeah, it's just much more refined than a lot of other stuff nowadays.
Yeah, and it's the quality shines through. It's an HBO show, whatever, an older one, I guess you can say, from 2018, I think is when it first started. So they were still, I don't know what HBO is going to be moving forward anymore, but this is one of those shows that's like Game of Thrones or like Sopranos or Curb Your Enthusiasm, where they're aiming for quality. And this is one, I think Veep might be HBO as well. So
yeah, it is.
Yeah, it's no surprise that I like it. I'm like,
so it started in 2018 and it's 4 seasons in, and it's ending in 2023. Okay, that makes sense. Because they skip like a year sometimes. It takes a while
especially during the pandemic.
Yeah, it makes sense.
So I like it. If you're into things like, I would compare it to, I guess, House of Cards a little bit, then this is.
I never watched that.
Yeah, it's good. It's like it's kind of like that, but not as disturbing, I guess, not as dark.
I'm more of like a Black Mirror kind of guy. Like I really enjoy that kind of.
Yeah, House of Cards goes a lot more political, and there's a lot more scandal as far as like, blackmail, sex stuff, and all alcoholism and all this other stuff. But Succession so far seems to be more about how these kids who seem to have been rich throughout their whole lives don't understand that they can't just inherit their father's company because they don't know what the fuck they're doing. And he knows that. And that's why he's like, I don't think I'm going to retire yet. I think I'm going to work another 5-10 years because my kids are not ready. They're going to sink this fucking company. Other companies are going to come in and buy them out, and they don't give a shit. So that's kind of the premise that it starts out.
That's real.
Yeah.
That's so real though.
It is. And you have the one kid who was promised the company and he's all pissed off, but they established that he clearly doesn't know what the fuck he's doing and no one respects him. So there you go. So good stuff, man. Well, Millennial Mike, I want to thank you for being on this week and talking some anime, manga, and movie news. Please let them know about Ronin Console if they want to get more manga and anime talk.
Absolutely. So you can find me on Twitter at Ronin Council. I think we're going to work out a situation where Sam is going to be kind of like doing the promotion of that. You haven't seen a lot of posts there. We're actually still working on editing the last episode, but because of my schedule and Sam's got some stuff going on, personal stuff going on right now, that's been kind of on the delay. But also, we're changing things up from 3 episodes a month to 2. So basically, one at the beginning, one at the end. So we can talk about basically what we're excited about and what actually paid off. So instead of having that one in the middle, it's going to be a little more definitive. And we like to make long episodes anyway. So instead of having like 3 1 out, like 3 2.5 to 3 hour anime episodes, we're gonna just do 2 basically, like, and that a season. And the season, as you guys know, is basically, like 3 months about. So I think that's actually going to work out a lot better for us. And you guys will still be able to have something to chew on. We'll have a lot more discussion in that way. And I think we're also going to start something too, where we'll have like a separate news podcast too. So we'll have mostly just anime discussion, which I think is what people want to actually hear. So yeah, if you're interested in that, at Ronin Council on Twitter, we'll try to keep you up to date. You can hit us up on Patreon at patreon.com/theexilesnet. And you can, find all the cast and crew on The Reason I'm Broke Discord, the Exiles Network Discord, the Lazy Gaming Guys Discord, the whole Exiles Network Reasons I'm Broke Discord family.
Yeah, I think if you're at all listening to Reasons I'm Broke only, I think you should. There's a lot of good stuff that if you enjoy this show, you'll like Ronin Console. You'll like Lazy Gaming Guys. So I think they're very good pairings if you enjoy this. I know you'll enjoy those. So I do recommend you checking out Ronin Console and Lazy Gaming Guys as well, both of which are found on the thing you're listening to us on right now. So whatever podcatcher you're using, chances are you'll find Ronin Console and Lazy Gaming Guys. If for some reason you don't, reach out to me or Millennial Mike or Scott, and I'll be sure to send over an RSS link to you. It's pretty easy to do, but I'm sure you'll find them as long as you do a very quick search. But otherwise, this week, if you want to, we talked about some Pokemon cards earlier. If you bought one of those 10 billion cards that were printed last year and you want to get it graded, head on over to treefroggrading.com, especially if you're in the UK. Use the coupon code BROKE for 5% off your submission. Tree Frog Grading just updated their labels. They're a lot more quote unquote professional looking, I guess, if you want to look at it that way. They got a little more serious about their labeling. And I like their old labeling. I like all the colors that would go with every different grade, but they still have that frog on there, which was my favorite part of the label. So once again, head on over to treefroggrading.com, discount code BROKE. But thank you so much for joining us this week. I've been Daniel, joined by Millennial Mike, and Broke at Core. All will be well. So one thing I forgot to ask, Mike, during the mid-year report of manga, why did you boo Blue Lock?
Oh, Blue Lock is just really cringe in my opinion. The main character thinks that he's some sort of like actual demon, and it's just so funny like how they all think they're superheroes when they're playing soccer, and it's not actually as like cool as it looks. At least when you're watching the anime is really not that well animated. Maybe if you're reading the manga, it's a lot more exciting, but I know a lot of people who really enjoy the anime, and I was like, come on, it's cringe.
All right, so it's a bunch of characters playing pretend is what you're saying.
Yeah, they're like a bunch of, well, I'm not sure if you know what a chunibyo is. You'll have to talk to Scott about that. He'll explain what that is, but
say it again.
They're like
chunido?
A chunibyo.
Chunibyo.
Yeah. But they're like, they all think they're like, they have like these spirit animals within them, and they're like, it's just cringe, man. It's like those cringe compilations that you post, but they're soccer players, you know. I mean, don't get me wrong, they're a lot more ripped than those guys, but it's just really cringe because it's like they're feeling themselves so much, and then you watch the animation and it's not really that good, and there's like no story, and it's just, there's so many other soccer animes or sports animes that are better.
Well, Millennial Mike does not approve of Blue Lock, and I look forward to hearing some other recommendations on Ronin Console.
You will.